Dr. Trisha Pasricha, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Thank you so much for having me. Doing great.
I'm a big fan. I love your content, as I shared with you off air. Your Washington Post contributions have made it across my Explore page many times. Always so entertaining, full of information. And I'm so excited about your book. What a title. You've been pooping all wrong. Amazing.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, this title is a real showstopper.
It literally is. Well, I'm excited because, pooping it can be a bit of a taboo topic, like GI, bowel habits, and the like. But everybody does it.
Yep, I hope.
We hope, right? And there are a lot of unasked questions that I am very excited to get to ask you over the next hour and some odd minutes. So let's just start off the deep end. What actually qualifies as a normal, healthy bowel movement in terms of frequency, shape, and color?
Yeah, I think when you ask that question, everyone thinks, oh, it's one movement a day. That's like the number we have in our minds. It's been ingrained since childhood. Like one is the holy number. That doesn't have to be the case. One is great. Once a day is wonderful. But that's not what we consider normal. For me, being normal just means two things. One, it should be effortless. It should be easy. You're not straining. Nobody's angry at you for hogging the bathroom for an hour. And then two, it shouldn't interfere with your social life. Like it shouldn't be that you are canceling plans because you're worried about the bathroom. It should occur at a socially appropriate time. If it does those two things, I'm happy, if you're happy. There was a study that was done for my colleagues at Beth Israel in Boston, and they asked a group of people looking at this survey across the country who considered that they had normal bowel movements, and they said, well, how often do you go? And it turns out that anywhere from every third day to up to 3 times per day is within the range of normal. So that's a huge range. And so as long as that's normal for you, and everyone's bowel movements, let's not forget, they're determined by lots of different factors at once, right? It's like what you're drinking. Are you hydrated? Are you having any artificial sweeteners get into your body? That can give you diarrhea. Are you stressed? What does your circadian rhythm look like? What are you eating? What's your fiber content? All of this can change every day, every month. So it might not be that you're sticking to just one pattern the rest of your life. It might change. Now, in terms of color and caliber, there are a lot of colors that could be normal, but the colors that are a bit more of like red flags, you should talk to a doctor, are certainly anything that looks like blood. That's red, that's maroon, that's obvious. But even black, like the color of our mics, like pure black, that could look like blood because when blood mixes with the acid in your stomach, it can turn black. So anything that looks like bleeding, talk to your doctor. But people slip into my DMs all the time to be like, hey, I had a green poop. Is that weird? I pooped purple. Is that weird? You're allowed to have a weird poop from time to time. And sometimes we have a good explanation. Sometimes we may not. Like lots of times we eat these anthocyanins in our diet. It can come in with berries, with red wine. And then maybe not even the next day, maybe 2 days later, you poop purple. And you're like, what? I don't remember eating purple food. Well, maybe not, but maybe 2 days ago you did have a glass of red wine and that's what's making this purple. Weird colors are okay as long as you don't feel sick, you don't have pain, you don't have new diarrhea. If you have any of these other things, any other red flag symptoms, you can always tell your doctor. I tell my patients, picture it didn't happen. Just take a quick picture. You can send it to me. I love it. We'll take a look. You
have patients that send you regular pictures of their bowel movements?
All the time. I'm a gastroenterologist. In fact, when they don't send me a picture, it's actually a little bit tough for both of us because then I have to just take their word for it, and I don't know what color they're describing.
Wow. That's amazing. Do you save them or do you just...
Immediately delete. No, it all goes to the electronic medical record. Please send it to me through the appropriate channel.
I was going to say, like, your photo reel must be, like... traumatizing.
Not safe for my kids. Yeah.
To the uninitiated. I remember once a couple, decade ago at this point. I was probably in my 20s actually, and I went to the bathroom and my BM was like a dark like red color, and I called my mom and I told my mom I thought I was dying.
Yeah.
And then she asked me, "Did you eat beets within the recent?"
Mom knew.
Yeah, like vicinity time frame. And I was like, yes, actually yesterday I had a lovely beet salad at this restaurant that I frequently went to, but it was the first time in my life that I'd ever actually like noticed the color, and it was like dark red. And I breathed a very relieving sigh of relief.
I'm glad you brought up beets because there's nothing quite so disappointing to a GI fellow who's getting ready to scope you for an emergency case when they find out you just ate beets and the whole thing, we call it all off. But it's true that, I think a lot of my patients, sometimes when I'm telling them like, did you take a picture of your weird poop? Half the time they're like, I did, thank God, let me show you. The other half are kind of like, no, that's too weird, or I don't really look, right? So like, I'm glad that you looked and that you did, but people need to get in the habit of looking every day so that they know when their pattern changes. Because this is a big deal. Like you said, it's an embarrassing topic. 1 out of 3 people, this is a study from the UK, 1 out of 3 people will avoid talking to their doctor because they're so embarrassed by their bowel symptoms to get help for it. And in today's age, where we're more concerned about early onset colorectal cancer than ever before in younger people, we have to get used to looking at our poop and knowing what's normal for us so that when we see a change, we know to act on it.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about that actually because, it's been a week or two since the wonderful, the amazing James Van Der Beek passed away.
Oh, my gosh.
And I actually knew him, and he was just we weren't like close friends or anything, but I've interacted with him, and he supported my work at one point, and I was just such a huge fan of his.
Yeah.
And it was such a gutting loss. I mean, I'm also friends with his wife. And I know that one of the things that he noticed early on was changes in his bowel habits, like predating his diagnosis.
Yeah.
What might some of those changes have looked like?
Yeah, let's talk about it. I think when we think about cancer, we think it's going to be this huge literal red flag. It's going to be blood. It's going to be blood in your stool. And certainly that's an obvious sign that you should get help. But more often we're seeing it's these really subtle signs. And we say change in bowel habits kind of deliberately. That's a vague term because we want it to mean a lot of things. Maybe it means that you have new diarrhea. You didn't have loose stools before. Maybe it means you feel constipated or that the stool is suddenly really thin. And you can't explain why that would be the case. So any change in bowel habits should warrant a conversation. Now, the good news in a way is that most likely it's not cancer. Like most likely if you have bleeding and you're young, it's probably hemorrhoids. It could be something worrisome. It could be inflammatory bowel disease. Cancer is not the number one thing, but because it's the one thing we can't miss, you have to bring it up. So even, I think a lot of young people, they don't get care. They don't talk to their doctors because they're like, well, this is not an emergency. It's not a big deal. I'll go see a doctor when it's really bothering me, when it's a really big deal. And my message to a lot of these younger people is don't wait for it to become a crisis. When it's a crisis, it's too late. There's a 90% survival rate for people who have early stage colon cancer, which means that catching it early is everything. We have to catch it early. We have to make our providers aware when there's even just a subtle change.
But is it a constellation of symptoms that might necessitate a call to one's doctor, or is it a single change? Because like occasional diarrhea, I feel like is like normal. I mean, I've had diarrhea at certain points in my life based on what I've eaten, or a shift in my ability to use the bathroom in accordance with my regular schedule. Like if I'm traveling, for example, sometimes you'll get like traveler's constipation followed by like diarrhea or something. So it's like, at what point should we actually get worried?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think poop is really mercurial. It's going to change day to day, all these different reasons. But if it's changed and you don't have an explanation, like everyone gets sick, everyone in your group ate that weird thing and everyone has diarrhea, great. I mean, maybe you need a doctor anyway, but maybe that's not the thing that drives you to worry about this. But if you can't explain it, and if it's in constellation with other things. So there was this study that came out that found that these 4 symptoms, abdominal pain, and I'm not talking about like 10 out of 10, appendicitis, just vague abdominal pain that you can't explain. Abdominal pain, change in bowel habits like we talked about, rectal bleeding, and then iron deficiency anemia, which is not a diagnosis you can make yourself. A doctor has to sort of do a blood test because you're feeling tired or low energy and make that diagnosis. If you had 3 or 4 of those 4 things, you were at a 6-fold higher likelihood of having colon cancer than people who didn't have those things. So for me, any one of those 4 is enough for me to pay attention and lean in and say, let's just make sure we're not missing something else. But certainly if you have more than 1, or if you have 3, if you have 4 of those things, that's really worrisome.
At what age should adults get their first colonoscopy as like a prophylactic measure, preventative care?
You know what? I'm glad you said preventative because people think that colonoscopies are for screening. And the age is 45. We used to be 50. We started at 45. But the thing about colonoscopies is that they're not just screening. Like we have other screening tools. We could poop in a box and we could do like Cologuard tests or stool tests. We could do a blood test. Those came on the market recently. Colonoscopies prevent the cancer because what we do during a colonoscopy is we're looking for these small growths called polyps. And those polyps, most of us, the majority of us are going to get polyps over the course of our lifetimes. And they're going to grow. And we know if we do nothing about them, 5 to 10% of them will become colon cancer. So when you do a colonoscopy, we will catch a cancer if we see something that's already grown, but what we're really trying to do is catch those polyps and cut them out and remove them before they ever become a problem. And so this is one test that's unlike so many other tests where we can prevent cancer and we're not just catching it. And so sometimes when you're 45, you're like, wow, colonoscopy feels like a big procedure. It's actually like half an hour of your life. It'll be okay. But it feels like a bigger deal than it is. You're like, well, let me just get the stool test. And I think you're missing the point then if you think it's just for screening.
What do we know what causes polyps?
Yeah, we know there's a lot of different risk factors. So one, there is a genetic component. We actually don't think genetics is driving the early onset cases that we've been seeing. We think it's mainly due to something in our environment and lifestyle. And so some of the things that we know are implicated in polyps are ultra-processed foods. That's probably the biggest one that's driven a lot of the conversation in the last year. Ultra-processed foods, alcohol, sugar-sweetened beverages seem to be a big risk factor early in life. And then other things that we are still kind of trying to understand related to our microbiome and even our mother's health early on. Those things seem to be increasing our risk, but we have some control over, we don't have control over everything we did in our childhood. Like, goodness knows, I drank a lot of Capri Sun growing up.
Same, actually.
Yeah. It was a great thing, but I've sort of changed my ways now. But we don't have control over what happened in our childhood for the most part. A lot of us just don't. But that doesn't mean we should sort of give up. I have a lot of patients who are like, oh my God, my 20s were I lived a wild life. That doesn't mean that it's all over for you by any means. The kind of interesting about cancer is that the moment you start making changes, your risk can start to go down. And so we know that, for example, reducing ultra-processed foods is helpful, but it's also about what you add in. And adding in fiber is really important. Whole foods are really important. And there's lots of studies showing how fiber is protective.
Amen. Okay, here's a really speculative question. Is there any relationship between polyps and skin tags? Because from my
skin tags where
on your skin, like well in the okay. So the reason why I ask is that as a non-expert, I mean, it would seem like a skin tag is in a way like a polyp on the skin, and I know that there's a strong relationship between skin tags and insulin resistance.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. We do know that there's also a link between insulin resistance and the metabolic syndrome and polyps. And I think all of these growths are reacting to inflammation. And what's driving the inflammation can be different things for our skin. It can be sunlight. It could be all these other things. But on the inside, it's often largely driven by our microbiome and by our diet.
So interesting. Is it true that the color of stool, assuming that there's actually blood in the stool, the color of that blood might indicate where along the GI tract the blood is coming from? Yeah.
It's not a perfect correlation, but typically the brighter the red, the closer to the end it is. And so sometimes when it's like a darker red, a maroon, like what you eat when you eat beets, that tends to tell us that it's higher up in the colon. It's not always perfect because sometimes somebody who's bleeding really quickly from higher up, if it's a quick bleed, it looks bright red, but it might be higher up. So you can get tripped up. Your job is to just recognize the red and go to the emergency room.
Love it. Okay, I want to go back to talking about poop.
Me too.
What about, so like people have different schedules, so to speak. I mean, I know that some people, like the moment they wake up, they have to go number 2.
Yeah.
Whereas other people are more like afternoon poopers.
Yeah.
Is that like, is there consistency that you see among people? Is there like a point in the day where it's more typical to have the urge to go?
Yeah.
What might cause that variation among people?
Have you ever heard of the Bristol stool scale?
I've heard of it, but yeah, like share with me.
Yeah. So this is a stool scale that we use in clinics, in GI clinics, that basically goes through what the different consistencies of stool could look like. And at the top, Bristol 1 are like these like small little rabbit pebbles, and all the way down is like just like brown soup. And it can help us kind of get a sense from someone where they are. But the reason I bring it up is because Bristol in England is this city where this famous gastroenterologist a couple of decades ago, he surveyed almost all the inhabitants of his city to try to figure out what their bowel habits look like. And that's where we learned that most people feel the urge to poop in the morning, but there's this second surge where a lot of people poop in the morning or they poop again after a meal. And as it turns out that your colon has a circadian rhythm, just like the rest of your body, but the colon is really special in that a lot of your other organs, they keep operating when you go to sleep, right? Your heart it might slow down, but it's still beating. Your kidneys are continuing to filter liquid. Your colon goes into a very quiescent state when you sleep. And the most powerful contractions that can occur in your colon, that natural feeling of when you feel that sense of urgency, it happens within the first 1 or 2 hours of waking up. And so I think that's where this myth actually took hold, is that, oh, you should have a 1 bowel movement a day. I think it comes from the fact that we are in some ways naturally primed to have a bowel movement in the morning, because that's when a lot of factors that cause contractions of our colon on their own happen. So just waking up, just that jump start of your circadian clock causes contractions. But then too, we know meals do it. Like just distension of your stomach causes this thing called the gastrocolic reflex to kick in. So whenever you sense that stretch, it sends a reflex up to your brain, which then goes back down, signals to your colon to contract. And that's also what's at play when people drink coffee, which we often do in the mornings. So 1 out of 3 people, when they drink coffee, they have to poop. Very normal. You might go for a walk first thing in the morning. So you might take your dog out, or you might go for a walk. Just exercise stimulates contractions. And so the morning is a nice time to go because a lot of these factors are coming together. But then it's also very, very normal to need or want to poop again after you have lunch, after you have your other big meal of the day, which is dinner time for a lot of people. You often need to go, but for, reasons that we have created, we find that to be less socially acceptable. But the morning time seems to be a time that works for a lot of people for their social calendars and because you have all these natural contractions happening.
Is it normal to have to poop after every meal?
Totally normal. I mean, I don't know if you have children. I have a 2 and a 4-year-old. They poop after every meal and they're living their best life. And a lot of kids do. And we kind of train ourselves over time to stop doing that, right? Because during our daytime, we're at work. That's awkward. We're having dinner with friends and families. It's awkward. Eventually, we train our bodies to not do that anymore. And we've tried to find these socially appropriate moments to do it during this increasingly small window in our day.
How bad is it to ignore the urge to poop?
In my opinion, there's no upside to it, and I think it's a problem for a lot of people. So 1 out of 3 people cannot poop when they're at work. But we spend so much of our day at work, right? And some people have the luxury of timing their morning to have a nice leisurely bowel movement before they get on with the rest of their day. Some people have really rushed mornings and they have to get through. And then when the window hits, it's when they're sitting at their desk with their colleagues and they would rather die than do it in a public bathroom where someone might walk in. So the problem that I tell them is that, yeah, you can put off that urge, because you don't have control over the contractions that your colon is producing, but you do have control over your sphincters. So you can clench and eventually you'll win. But if you wait, the other important job of your colon is that it is constantly sucking water out of whatever's in there. And it's absorbing that water, it's putting it back in your bloodstream. It's going to keep doing that regardless of anything that you have control over. Meaning, if you don't poop when your colon tells you it is time, and you're like, it's going to be a better time this evening. You come back to it, it's a different poop. It's not the same one you started with. It's drier, it's harder. Your colon is not working with you. It's not contracting naturally. It was doing that earlier. So now you have to generate an even stronger Valsalva maneuver. You have to bear down harder for an even harder poop. It's a lose-lose.
What about, is there any truth to the lore that because poo contains compounds that the body has deemed that is marked for excretion, right?
Right.
So the idea that you're just letting this toxic mass, just sit in the colon.
Yeah, that's a really old idea. That's an idea that's actually, it's been around since the time of the ancient Egyptians. But John Kellogg of Kellogg fame, he too was really worried that whatever we eat, and especially if we're talking about meats or things that could decay, on our table, if we ate those, they would somehow decay inside our bodies. And he was, I think, totally right in a lot of ways about fiber, but he was really off in terms of what happens during digestion. And as soon as you eat, whatever you eat gets immediately acidified in your stomach. Your stomach has a much lower pH than you appreciate. So sometimes people are just worried about what they put into their bodies and whether it's going to harm them. And there are ways you can cause harm later on, but the stomach does a really good job. It's very hardy. And then as it moves its way along, you're absorbing all the things that you don't need. You're not absorbing the things that you can't digest, like fiber. You cannot digest that. That's a good thing because that's what your microbes feed off of. None of this is decaying. None of it is toxifying in any way. Everything that you absorb, remember, if you think about human anatomy, whatever comes into your bloodstream from your gut doesn't hit your systemic circulation. It all has to be filtered first by the liver. The liver does a really good job at taking out any kinds of chemicals that you might need. It's really only when we put the liver through repeated stress and it stops feeling able to do its job because it's becoming inflamed because of a pattern and a pattern of way of eating or drinking that we can cause problem. But just like if you're like, oh, I ate this like really weird takeout meal, I feel like that's not the issue.
And certain kinds of foods don't even make it to the colon, right? Like John Kellogg was kind of off. He probably should have brushed up on his physiology because, foods like meat, eggs, and stuff like that, these are considered like low residue foods, are they not? Like they're so nutrient dense, there's no fiber, right, in meat. And a lot of that material gets absorbed in the small intestine. Like what ultimately ends up in the colon is like vegetable fiber, fibers matter and the like, right?
Yeah, exactly. By the time, I think we have it in our minds that poop is disgusting, and it does. Nobody will tell you poop smells great. Like it is, and it did used to carry diseases, but it's actually not toxic. Like you don't want to eat it, and you have to wash your hands. But it's not like this, harmful radioactive chemical either.
Yeah, it's not. It's just like decaying, or not decaying, but just like the fibrous material that
it's just the leftovers
you didn't absorb.
And honestly,
and bacteria from your microbiome, etc.
By mass, most of it is your microbes. It's actually not even the leftover soluble fiber. It's just your microbes that have shed and they're just hanging out in there and they're floating. And actually, poop is actually our natural color of poop. Is kind of the color of your t-shirt. It's this like whitish, clayish color.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's our bilirubin, which is this digestive juice stored in our gallbladder that gives it this like classic, maybe even this is not quite the right shade of brown, but it gives it that nice brown shade. If you were to take that bilirubin out of the equation, it would look like your t-shirt.
Wow, fascinating.
I know.
Why is bilirubin brown? Like, why is the universal color of poop brown? I just like somehow ended up on my Explore page earlier, and there was like a video of a snake pooping. And I was like watching, and it was like, it looked remarkably like a dog poop or like a human poop.
Yeah.
And it was brown.
Yeah. It's all the bile. And I don't know, like what is it about that compound that gives it the brown shade? But I will say if you don't have brown and you see the clay, that is an emergency. Because that means the bilirubin is being blocked somewhere. Maybe it's a gallstone, maybe it's a cancer. If you see clay colored, I pay really close attention.
Wow, that is so interesting.
Mm-hmm. The more you know.
Is a ghost wipe a sign of good bowel habits?
It's not a good sign. People talk about this like holy ghost poop where you poop and it's like, did it even happen? Was it ever there, right? It just like immediately sinks to the bottom. You don't have to wipe. I think that's lovely. If you have that every day, I think that's delightful. The truth is though, if you start to meet your fiber goals, you're eating a lot of fiber. For men under 50, that's 38 grams per day. For women, it's 25 grams per day. It becomes increasingly unlikely that you're going to have ghost poops. You're most likely going to have to wipe because you're just going to have softer, more plush stools. That's very normal. You might hold on to that and you might say, you know what, because you have some control, I'm going to wait, I'm going to go a little bit later, and then it'll become more firm. But in and of itself, just having a ghost poop isn't necessarily a marker of health. It often is just like a nice, comfortable thing to have happen, but it doesn't tell you too much about you.
Well, I had a very interesting observation. A couple of years ago, I weaned myself off of coffee. Ooh. And I found myself, not because I think coffee's unhealthy in any way, like coffee's wonderful, but I think at the time drinking way too much of it.
Yeah, I'm in that boat right now.
Yeah, and you can feel like that wired and tired feeling is not fun.
Yeah.
So at a certain point, I decided to wean myself off of it. And it was like a couple months where I was like completely caffeine free. And I would notice that the odds of having like a ghost wipe was like way more that became more the norm for me. And so I developed this hypothesis that I don't know if it's ever been tested in the peer reviewed medical literature, but that when you drink coffee, it like kind of pushes out poo that's like been half formed. Like it's not it's not necessarily like ready to come out on its own accord as it would be if you were like caffeine free. But when you drink coffee, it like stimulates everything. Like everything's got to come out now.
I think you're totally right.
You think?
I don't know if that particular question has been studied. The idea that coffee stimulates a bowel movement, incredibly well studied. We've known that since the 90s. But maybe we should do the study where we see what is the frequency. Do you get ghost poops or not when you cut out coffee?
Fascinating.
People want to know.
It is an interesting question.
I think it makes sense physiologically.
What about like when you actually like sit on a toilet? Because another interesting thing that I discovered, they don't give you a manual for this stuff. Like a lot of these discoveries I've had to make just on my own, you know. And then I relish the opportunity to talk about them with you and an expert in front of millions of people. But I was living in a rental apartment, and the rental apartment was very old. It was like one of these like old LA like units, and it had this like historic toilet that was very low to the ground. It was like a classic.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It was like this like classic old school toilet, and it was very comfortable to poop on.
Yeah.
Because it was super low to the ground, and I'm like 6'1", so you know, for me that was
doing
just
a real squat.
Yeah, it was very comfortable. And then at a certain point, unfortunately that toilet broke, and the building had to replace it with an ADA compliant toilet, like an American Disabilities Act compliant toilet, which I don't really know the regulation there, but needless to say, it was a very tall toilet. It was an uncomfortably tall toilet.
Yep.
And I didn't immediately like make this connection, but I noticed that within, you know, after the first couple of weeks or months since having replaced that toilet, my digestion was just like completely off. I was like more constipated every day. I wasn't eliminating completely. And then at a certain point, I put two and two together that it was the height of the toilet.
Yes.
What might explain that?
Gosh, I'm sorry you had to learn that the hard way, for one.
Literally. It was the worst.
Yeah. Well, this is exactly the kind of stuff that they don't teach you. And I mean, the truth is that most of what we learn about going to the bathroom is what our parents taught us when we were potty training. And who remembers that conversation? I had that conversation with my kids like last year. I know they're not going to remember it when they grow up. But, you know, these normal sort of standard toilet seats that we have, like, or they're kind of like these chairs. You're sitting at this 90-degree angle. That's not how we used to poop for thousands of years before the modern toilet. Like back in ancient Rome, I think is where things started to go wrong, because you'd find these toilets that are like chair-like. But before that, people were just squatting. Squatting is the natural way to poop. And the reason why is because if you think about your colon, it's this long tube. When you squat, there's this sling, this muscle called the puborectalis muscle that's like a sling that goes around that tube. And when you're sitting at a 90-degree angle, it's almost like your body is like stepping on a hose and putting a kink in it. Okay, and so you've got this kink in your hose, and you're trying your best to push your stool out against this blockade. When you squat, that sling muscle relaxes and the tube straightens out again, and you don't have to do nearly as much work. And so they've done these studies. Now listen, nobody wants to squat. When I say that, everyone's like, this is where I leave this episode. I'm like, not gonna squat. You don't have to squat. You just have to raise your knees above the level of your waist. So like you having that low toilet was kind of naturally doing that for you. You can use the stool. You don't have to buy anything branded. You could just use like a discrete stack of books. You could wear stilettos. Like there's other ways to get your knees above the level of your waist. And when you do that, the studies have found that even healthy people who don't have a diagnosis per se of constipation or a problem, everybody agrees that that will make their bowel movements easier. And 1 out of 6 people who do have a diagnosed problem with their pelvic floor muscles will suddenly be able to poop again with just by adding this like small elevation of their feet in there.
I have squatty potties on every toilet in my house.
Oh my God, good for you.
Game changer.
Yes.
What do you do if you're going number 2 and it feels like there is like a last bit of poop that you can't seem to get out?
Yeah. This is very common. Some people feel, if this is your pattern, that you feel like you never quite completely evacuate, you have 2 options. One is you can bear down and try to strain just a little bit harder. That's what you have control over. I don't usually recommend that route because eventually you do that over and over again. Well, you start to put yourself at increased risk of hemorrhoids if that's your pattern. If that's your pattern, though, it might clue us into the fact that there's a bit of an issue with your pelvic floor muscles. And we call this pelvic floor dyssynergia. This is a really underappreciated cause of constipation. It feels like constipation. It feels like I just never completely empty, or I have to strain for 20 minutes. You might have tried all these laxatives. They don't seem to work. You might be adding fiber to your diet. 1 out of 3 people with just run-of-the-mill constipation, they've tried laxatives, they don't work. The problem is not their colon, the problem is their pelvic floor muscles. And when I hear people who come to my clinic say, you know, I feel like there's stool in there, but I just couldn't get it all out. I don't feel emptied. I start to think about pelvic floor dysfunction. And to be clear, pelvic floor dysfunction, I think a lot of people immediately think about, oh, this is like what happens to women after childbirth. It's like an issue with going to the bathroom to pee. Totally separate issue. This can happen to men and women, happens almost equally in our older age. And it's really a retraining of our muscles that's happened involuntary over years. Like, for example, I have a lot of people who would say, like, in college, I wasn't eating any fiber. I was just eating like hamburgers every meal, or like whatever it was. And then later on in my 30s and 40s, I went plant-based and now I'm pooping great. But during those 10, 20, 15 years that you were having a low fiber diet, you had to train your body to strain even harder, to have a bowel movement. Like, you got used to straining and you thought that was normal. And over time, those muscles got beefier in your sphincters and they started to contract instead of relax, so that even when you fixed the original problem, you have nice, plush, pillowy, soft stool, your muscles are not going to work with you. And so you have to get those retrained.
Are there any exercises that you recommend doing to strengthen those muscles? And do you ever refer out to a physical therapist?
Yeah, actually, there's really good data. So I almost always refer to someone, a pelvic floor physical therapist. And again, this sounds really weird to people. They're like, people are not used to having someone get in there. But it's actually, people 80 to 90% get better after just a couple of weeks of physical therapy. And a lot of it are just exercises that you do at home, which is great. The point often is actually not to strengthen those muscles unless you have the other problem, which is accidental bowel leakage. We see that too, very common. But really what you want to do is actually retrain those muscles to relax. Because imagine, like, right now, if I were to bear down and I'm like generating all of this intrathoracic pressure, like if I were to do that, even my fists clench because it's just hard to do. It's so paradoxical that while we do that, we expect our sphincters to relax at the same time. But that's what you have to do to have a bowel movement. So it's actually not unexpected that for a lot of people, the sphincters start to do what the rest of your body's doing and they clench up. So the goal is actually to retrain those muscles. And it's not something that you did on purpose. It takes years of kind of those muscles subconsciously doing something that works against you.
What are the exercises called? Are they like just Kegels?
They're not quite Kegels, because Kegels are actually meant to strengthen the pelvic floor. And so sometimes that can work against you if depending on the problem. But actually I don't even tell people to try this at home. I tell people go to a physical therapist. And the type of physical therapy that has been shown in studies to work really well for this is something called biofeedback therapy. So look for someone who does biofeedback. And what biofeedback is, and this is one example, there's lots of ways to do it, but they might say, like, okay, let's put some electrodes on your stomach. And then you're going to look at what the kind of muscles are doing in your abdominal wall while you bear down. And you might say that, like, okay, I'm looking at these muscles, let me bear down. And you think that you're generating all this pressure that you're pushing downwards, but actually you're just like pushing all of this pressure up into your face. And then they'll say, okay, try it a little bit differently. And then you watch those waveform changes. Biofeedback means you're taking your body's own measurements and you're using it to inform the changes that you make. And so that's the thing. I mean, we see this in so many other aspects of medicine, but sometimes seeing it is really what makes it click, and seeing those changes play out.
So interesting. So we've talked about, obviously fiber, and I talk about fiber all the time. I'm a big fan and advocate of consuming an array of plant fibers from whole foods.
Yeah.
But beyond dietary pattern, are there any supplements that you think might be helpful? I know magnesium often comes up.
Yeah, magnesium is great. People are often looking for more natural ways to improve their bowel habits. So supplement-wise, magnesium is powerful and good for bowel movements. I like psyllium husk. Psyllium husk is a fiber supplement. It's soluble, meaning it'll turn to gel if you don't. You should mix it with water. I mix it in my coffee, which means like I really have to chug that coffee or it'll turn into gel.
You mix it in your coffee?
I do. I know. And I have to I don't know if I recommend people doing it, but you have to constantly stir it so that it doesn't gel up. And then I'm like drinking it and like poking my eye out with a spoon. But it's like, it also just gets the job done because I'm drinking coffee anyway. I want to get my fiber goals met. It works. And it really does help regulate you, whether you're constipated or whether you have diarrhea. So I really like psyllium husk. Magnesium's great. I think if I'm talking to someone and they're like, I just want something like a natural laxative, the other thing I tell people about are 2 kiwis. There have been two big randomized control trials that show that kiwis are very effective in improving the number of bowel movements you have per week, but also they don't cause bloating. Like I think a lot of the solution of our grandparents was prunes, and like prunes will still work, but have you ever tried to convince a college student to eat more prunes? Like I've never,
but I happen to love prunes. So
you do?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so then you don't need the kiwi trick. The kiwi is for the people who will absolutely not eat prunes.
Kiwi are great. I had a kiwi this morning. I'm a huge fan of kiwi. Also can help with sleep. There's a number of studies showing that, or maybe one. But yeah, that there's evidence that kiwi might help before bed, help with sleep. So it's almost like a 1-2 punch.
Yeah.
Might help with your next morning bowel movement and get you to sleep faster.
What could be better?
What could be better? And then the prune thing, I mean, I genuinely love prunes, but I was sort of skeptical of its impact on bowel function until I remember, like, this was like over a decade ago at this point, but I was like hanging out with an ex-girlfriend, and we were like, it was like a Netflix and chill night, and I decided that like the snack of the night
was going to be prunes. Bold move. How far into that relationship were you?
We were at that point pretty far, but I had no idea until that night, because we just were like prune-maxing and and I remember it was like no fewer than 6 trips to the toilet. I think it affected her, and it was just it was a wild ride.
It's potent stuff. Yeah,
it is very potent.
Prunes are not for the weak.
No. What is it about prunes?
They haven't figured it out. I mean, they've asked the same question about kiwis, like why kiwis of all things? Because it doesn't seem to be the fiber. It's just the fiber. Like in these, there have been randomized controlled trials comparing head to head prunes matched by fiber content to psyllium husk, to kiwis. They're all doing the same thing, but there's just some other micronutrient that's driving it, and we haven't quite identified it yet.
That is so interesting. Wow. I want to ask you about some trending topics on social media that are related to the subject of your expertise in your new book. You've been pooping all wrong. Well, for one, there's a trend that I don't know how widespread the trend is, but there's definitely like a cohort of men typically that are practicing it. Fartmaxxing. What do you make of this trend of fartmaxxing on social media now?
Tell me what fartmaxxing is on a deeper level.
On a deeper level, it appears to be it's certainly there's at least one person who's doing it. I don't know how broadly.
Because it's not the same as fiber maxing.
No, it's not the same as fiber maxing. I'm supportive of fiber maxing.
Totally.
But when the fiber comes from whole foods, not ultra processed junk foods that are fortified with fiber. But fart maxing, on the other hand, is it's just a group of guys that are looking to, via whichever means necessary, maximize their gaseous output.
So they'll like eat a flatulogenic diet.
A flatulogenic diet.
That's
I've never heard that word before.
Term.
Wow.
Yeah, when we study farting, that's what we call it. Like just like beans and stuff.
Amazing. Yeah. So that's what they're doing.
So that's what they're doing.
Yes.
I guess I have 2 opinions about this. One is, if this is your way of enjoying eating more fiber, great. Second, I think we should be more lenient to people who fart, because I think we underestimate how much everyone else is farting. So like the people who are doing it loudly and proudly, what they're controlling is, to some extent, not really how much they're farting, but the sound. We all can control the sound. Like, that, I know that. Like, it's just a question of how quickly you release it. But we all fart between 10 to 20 times per day.
Wow.
And that's a large number. And I have people who come to my clinic. Sometimes the reason they come to my clinic is they're worried that they fart more than other people. And they're like, am I normal? I'm not normal. And then I'm, when I say, okay, why don't we just keep a quick log, like count how many times you go. And then turns out they're like just disappointingly under average. They'll fart 15 times a day, and I'll say, you know what, that's totally normal. You have nothing to worry about. Like, you're just, society's the problem, not you.
Yeah.
And so I don't have a problem. If someone wants to fart and they'll be proud of it, I'm all for it, especially if it means they're eating more vegetables.
Isn't it like in some cultures a sign that you've had like a good meal, like to
heard that.
Fart?
I have heard that. I think somewhere in East Asia. I have yet to be in a situation where that's been appreciated. But maybe one day I'll be invited to those dinners.
Destigmatize farting. Is there a difference in the way that men versus women do it? The number, the sensorial effect that flatulence might have?
I'm so glad you asked. Well, let me ask you, who do you think has worse smelling farts? What would you guess?
Well, I would guess that it doesn't have anything to do with gender, and it has more so to do with like the diet. Yeah.
So speaking of the diet, there was this study, and there have only been a handful of studies on this topic. Like the NIH didn't fund like 20 grants on this, but they funded this one guy who did a lot of these physiological studies several years ago. And one thing he was looking at was, were there any differences between men and women who farted? So he took people, put them on a flatulogenic diet of like lots of beans and the couple days leading up to the study. And then during the day, he literally connected them to a tube in their bums And then that tube led to this chamber, and he collected the farts. And I know this is like, the study design is amazing. And then the second half of the study was he had different people who were blinded rate how offensive the smell was on like a 1 to 5 scale. And what he found is that, first of all, our gas, 99% of it is odorless that comes from our intestine. It's only, there's 1% that contains sulfur in it. That's the part that's the problem. And it turns out that men produced a larger volume of farting. And he didn't control for, he didn't necessarily control for body mass index or other measures of weight. So it's hard to say, but men in general, for whatever it's worth, more volume. But the women seem to have more concentrated levels of that sulfur. And so the conclusion that was reached by these third-party raters was that it actually ended up evening out. The men had more volume, the women were more concentrated. There was no real difference. So to me, I think the big difference between the sexes is just that I think women tend to try to be far more discreet about it. And I think some men, as like a lifestyle choice, are a little bit louder about it. Mm-hmm. But everyone's doing it the same.
Especially if you have brothers.
Yes.
But I wonder then if I still wonder if it's like a gender thing or if it's based on the different dietary patterns of men versus women. I mean, men and women tend to eat differently.
Yeah, I think it's all dependent on the sulfur content in your microbiome and what you're putting in your body.
Have you caught wind of, no pun intended?
That was good.
There is a new, there's what's being called the Fitbit for Farts.
The underwear?
Yes. So the Wall Street Journal did an article. The headline is, it's called the Fitbit for Farts, and it's no joke. Scientists are developing a new underwear in hope that this technology can do for gastroenterology what the Apple Watch did for cardiology.
Yeah.
You think there's any insight to be gleaned from the constituent gases of one's farts?
I'm really excited about this research. I met this person from University of Maryland. I met him at our like big digestive diseases conference last year. I think he's really cool. I think he's picked up the reins of an area that someone needed to pick up the reins on. So I'm glad he's doing this. I think we can learn. Like, farting is it's like one of those things that we worry so much about. I think in a lot of ways, like we're all a little embarrassed about it. We're doing it, but we don't talk about it. We don't research it. And it's such a common, we're doing it 20 times a day. Why is nobody studying it? And like, I'm really glad he is. I mean, I'll be excited to see what we learn.
Yeah. I mean, there's also a technology that I recently learned about. I was being marketed it on Instagram. No affiliation, but it's called Throne. It's like an AI camera that you put on your toilet and it like looks at your stool.
Oh yeah, I've seen that too. And it'll like supposedly like it'll detect like if there's any microscopic blood or something like that, right?
I suppose something like that.
Yeah, that'll be the future. You have to be careful about cameras in your toilet, but yeah.
I would assume so. Yes.
I'm sure they've got that figured out.
Privacy, yeah, like that does seem to be a Pandora's box. Coffee enemas. Coffee enemas are something that I think have been trending for some time now. It's not a recent trend on the socials, but there are a lot of people that think that they're just pseudoscience, maybe even potentially harmful. But I know that they also have quite a bit of fans, to be fair.
Yeah. I don't love. It depends on why you're doing it. Would change what I say. There's no scenario where I endorse or I support. But I also, I don't try to judge people who are trying to help themselves in some ways because there's a symptom. So enemas in general, some people lean for when they are severely constipated. And there's a role for enemas in the treatment of really severe constipation. When you add coffee in them, again, is it because you're trying to trigger that reflex? And then there's people who do the coffee enemas for nothing related to your bowel. It's because more for like other just general wellness, anti-inflammatory properties and other reasons. I think if you're in that camp, I think there's better ways to improve your health and even improve your gut health. But if you're doing it because you're worried about a particular gut symptom that you feel like other things haven't really addressed, like you've tried other things and this seems to be helping, I would love to talk to those people. And I see them in my clinic, not infrequently, like for whatever reason, coffee enemas are still a thing. And then we just try to figure out what is the symptom that you're trying to treat and what are the other things that maybe you haven't thought about that are maybe even a little bit more effective and a little bit safer.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about colonics? There are a lot of colonic spas, colon hydrotherapy, I think it's sometimes called.
Yes, yeah. There's, one common reason I see that people do colonics, like even one of my friends, was doing this. People think that there is just like pounds of stool caking their colons, and like, or if things have been sluggish for a couple of days, maybe they haven't been eating the way they wanted, like whatever the reason is, they think a colonic will help reset because it'll just flush everything. It'll give you like a nice, good, baseline to start from. But that's just not the case. Like your colon doesn't have stool just like caking the sides of it the way you might picture in your mind. The colon, it has this really thick mucus layer. Stuff doesn't actually stick to it that well. And it's constantly, that mucus layer is constantly moving and turning over. So when you're doing a colonic, you are introducing a lot of water. When you introduce anything into your colon, you can stimulate bowel movements because just that pressure can kind of cause a little bit of stimulation. And you're going to purge. Like you're going to have water is going to go in, a lot of water is going to come out. None of that, I think, is healthy or necessary for someone who doesn't have any kind of issues at baseline.
But you often hear that. It's so true that like we're walking around with like pounds and pounds of like caked up, built up.
Yeah, and you just need to
stool.
like flush and start over. And to be sure, like there are people who have a disease, who have slow transit constipation, who have severe dysmotility of their guts where maybe things aren't moving along. But even when things aren't moving along, they're just kind of sitting there, but they're not building up or sticking around in your body. They're just moving, but very, very slowly, even in people with the disease.
What is poophoria?
Poophoria. It's a state of being. It's a state of being that I want people to reach. It's not just having one great bowel movement, which is great, which is euphoria. But poophoria is actually where having a bowel movement is the least of your daily concerns. It's like a state where you're not thinking about your bowel habits at all. And that's because 40% of Americans say that their bowel habits disrupt their daily lives. That's a huge number of people, not just like who like have an occasional bothersome poop, but disrupts their daily lives. And so what I try to teach people about, giving them that speech that they never got as adults about how to have a bowel movement is that what we're aiming for is a way of life here. And so that you should be able to walk your dog without fear of like, where's the bathroom going to be? You should tell your partner, yeah, let's leave in 15 minutes. And 45 minutes later, you're not still sitting in the bathroom and everyone's angry at you. It should be just something that you go in, it takes you a minute, you respond to the call, you have a call, and then you respond to it, and you get the heck on out of there, and you don't think about it again for the rest of your day.
Hear, hear. What do you say to people who do have a fear of pooping in public?
Yeah, it's tough. And first of all, I get that. I tell people that you should go in public. Like, I think one of the worst things to do is actually to defer the call. I think there are a lot of different tricks to get around having to poop in public. Like sometimes, yeah, like maybe the bathroom nearest to you in your building is like this multi-stall like nightmare. But there's often a safe bathroom. Like everywhere you work and every building I've worked in, I have always hunted down and found the safe bathrooms. There's one like tucked around the corner that no one visits. It's weird. It's dark. That's your safe bathroom. Find the safe ones. If you cannot find a good one, like suppose you've done your due and that you can't find one. I think one of the biggest problems sometimes is people being too in the moment, like listening for every sound or listening for people coming in. Sometimes I tell people just put in headphones, like distract yourself from your environment. Put in headphones, get the job done, get out. By the way, this applies to people who are in the stall next to you. If you're in the bathroom, you're on your phone scrolling and someone else comes in, like be polite. Pull up your pants and go. Like, don't keep like when there's other people in there, nobody wants to be that guy stuck in. But there are ways to get around it. And sometimes, to have a bowel movement, you have to generate this pressure during a Valsalva maneuver, which is that bearing down. But to really have a good bowel movement, you have to relax. And when you have that Valsalva maneuver, which paradoxically you're increasing your pressure, you're actually signaling your vagus nerve, which is relaxing, and it can kind of help things relax. So I would tell people to do what it takes to relax in that moment. Maybe that is a little box breathing. I'd love a nice box breathing because that does stimulate the vagus nerve and it helps you calm down. Maybe you need to read a little book, like pull out a little, don't distract yourself too long because that's a problem, but just something to distract you. A lot of people find that reading almost any material distracts them just enough to be able to have a comfortable bowel movement.
Super interesting. I'll poo anywhere. Like I have no shame. Like I'll go, like in public, it's not an issue for me.
Yeah. And bring a little, like some people, I even tell them like, bring a little of your own like spray afterwards. If that's what bothers you, you're like, oh, everyone's going to know I was in there because it's like the shared bathroom. Well, just pack your own spray and get out.
I'm not into the whole like air freshener thing. I don't want to see it. poopery, like that's a thing. Like I don't
Yeah.
want to see it. I just like
Perfumes bother me, so I
Yeah.
don't love them, and there's like lots of reasons why you not. But if that's the thing that gives you peace of mind, I wouldn't take that away from you.
to me, it's just like if I'm smelling air freshener in a bathroom, like
It's like a bigger
I just
sign.
know that like you just pooped. Like I'm not going to say I'd rather smell the poop, but I don't want to smell like some fake floral linen breeze.
You want to know the
Over
enemy you
poop.
know.
Yeah. It's like, to me, that's gross. Like there's no air freshener, no poopery. Like keep it out of my sight.
Yeah, just ventilate.
Just ventilate. Yeah. Is using your phone while pooing, is that like something, I mean, obviously
Yeah.
if it distracts you and it stimulates your parasympathetic rest and digest
Yeah.
response, that's a good thing.
Yeah. When I was growing up, I'm sure you remember this, people used to have like this little stack of bathroom readers, right? Like this little discreet, like it would be like last week's newspaper, old magazines. You don't see that anymore, right? Because everyone's bringing their smartphones in.
Right.
And when it was 2 years, maybe 3 years ago now, I was writing this column for the Post where a reader had written in asking about hemorrhoids. And I was like, delightful. I would love to talk about this. And in my GI training, we always tell patients, don't spend more than 5 minutes on the bathroom because we're worried that's going to cause hemorrhoids. But it turns out that number wasn't really based on anything from our modern times. It was like from this study from the 1980s looking at people who read newspapers in the bathroom. And obviously we haven't been doing that I haven't seen a physical newspaper in a long time in someone's bathroom. So we did this study at Beth Israel where we looked at people who brought their smartphones in to the bathroom when they had to have a bowel movement. And then we did their screening colonoscopies and we looked for hemorrhoids. And it turns out that bringing your smartphone in to the bathroom was associated with a significantly higher risk, 46% increased risk of having hemorrhoids at the time of your colonoscopy. And we asked people about other habits that we think are linked to hemorrhoids, like fiber intake, exercise, all these things. And the factor that we think seems to be the issue, the driving issue, because it's not smartphones so much, it's the time. It's the time you spend. Having a smartphone, people who brought those in were more than 5 times as likely to spend more than 5 minutes at a time in the bathroom. And when you're sitting on this open toilet bowl, you have no pelvic floor support. Hemorrhoids are just these cushions of veins. And those veins become engorged over time if there's nothing sort of giving them counter pressure. And the connective tissue can weaken the longer you sit there. So it's not like, oh yeah, you bring your smartphone in and then you accidentally watch like one full episode of The Pit one time. That's not going to give you hemorrhoids. But it's when you do that day after day, week after week, over time, that's how we think the hemorrhoids develop. So just like we tell people, at my family, we try not to bring the smartphones to the dining table. I try really hard not to bring my smartphone to bed at night. Don't bring them to the bathroom either. There's nothing good that can come of that. And I think the difference is that back in the day when we were just like reading whatever reading material we could find, that stuff wasn't hijacking our brains the way that social media does, the way that like these good, like you couldn't watch a movie before in the bathroom. You can totally do that now.
You totally can. Is it true that those veins are what help your anus distinguish between liquid, solid, and gas?
Yeah, that was one of life's greatest mysteries until they discovered, and this is fascinating. So these cushions, you could have internal and external hemorrhoids. The external ones you know about because they pop out, they're uncomfortable, they can itch. The internal ones, you usually don't know that you have until they become engorged and bleed. And if you see bleeding, maybe your doctor will tell you it's because they saw internal hemorrhoids. But those internal hemorrhoids are actually constantly sampling the environment right there in your rectum and constantly giving feedback back to your brain that this is gas, this is liquid, this is solid. So it gives you that message like, oh yeah, this is clear. You can release this into the world if you want. Or no, my God, don't do it right now. This is liquid. And you hold on to it a little bit longer. But that's how you know, because otherwise, how would you be able to tell the difference? It's not a conscious decision you're making, but it's because they have these highly processed cells. This is what the studies have suggested, that are sending that back subconsciously back to your brain.
Very powerful. Mm-hmm. And also they probably, they're very important from a survival standpoint because like other animals, like they would have to bury their stool, right?
Yeah.
So as not to be caught by predators. Yeah,
totally.
Tracked.
Yeah. We owe our hemorrhoids a big thank you.
We do.
Yeah.
Clearly. Wow, this is so interesting. Are there any gut health, poo related myths on social media that you wish would just die?
I do think the myth about once a day, I think that should die, but only because I see people swing in one direction or the other. Like, for example, people will come in and I'll be like, hey, are you constipated? And they'll be sitting there with their partner and they're like, no, that I'm not. I go once a day. And their partner will be like, but you spend 45 minutes in the bathroom to go. That's not normal. But in our minds, because we've trained people to believe once a day is normal, they'll normalize everything else that went into that. That's not normal if you're spending 45 minutes at a time. And then, on the flip side, there's actually even in some American medical manuals back in the day used to tell people, hold it in. If you have to go more than once a day, hold it in so that you form this like nice formed patty once a day. That's nuts too. You should go when it's time to go.
Is it true that shopping in department stores increases the urge to poop?
Yeah. I don't know if you've noticed this, but there is this phenomena for some people that certain types of stores, maybe it's a bookstore, that's where this was first described. Bookstores tend to do it. I hear from a lot of my patients, Target. There's something about Target that brings it out of people, but it's the urge to poop when they hit a certain type of environment. And we don't have a great explanation for it, but what I think is happening is that I think one of the most fundamental aspects of pooping, like we've hinted at before, is you have to feel safe. You have to feel comfortable. It's really hard unless you have diarrhea because you're stressed, and that's a different situation. You have to feel safe in order to have a bowel movement. And I think, and the second part of that is that your colon can actually become trained. It's like different from a lot of other organs that you can create a new habit and a new pattern just by repeating the same set of sensory and environmental inputs that eventually it will respond to. I mean, even Ivan Pavlov discovered this, the guy who like rang the bell, the dog started to salivate, thinking that the bell was associated with a meal, such that even when he rang the bell and there was no meal, they would start to salivate. And that just shows how the digestive tract is so influenced by our brains, by our thoughts, and by our environments. And so I think what happens to people is that you go to a Target, it's your safe space, and you feel safe and comfortable. And then maybe one of those times, maybe you've grabbed a latte while you're in there at the Starbucks, that's what I do. You go to the bathroom, and it's a great experience. And now the second time you go to that Target, you bring those memories back. You're smelling that same, bookshelf aisle, whatever it is, the sensory cues. And then you have to do it again. And then you go again. And now you're just reinforcing this habit because your colon is a creature of habit. It does actually like patterns. It likes these schedules, and it will be trained. And in a way, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's why I tell my patients who are struggling with constipation, just start trying. Just, build a schedule in the morning. Build yourself like another 10, 15 minutes where you say, I'm going to do everything I can to make this success. I'm going to drink some coffee. I'm going to go for a quick walk. And then I'm going to set aside the next 5 minutes to try. And if the magic doesn't happen in the 5 minutes, fine, get up and go. But then try again tomorrow, and then try again tomorrow. And eventually your colon can start responding to all of those things.
Wow. Mm-hmm. It also happens when people get back from long trips, right? When they finally get home after a long trip.
And they're like, thank God I don't have to poop in the same bathroom as all my cousins and like everywhere. Yes.
They get home. It's like finally like a full, like the evacuation that they've been
waiting
praying for the whole duration of the trip. Yeah. So interesting, man. There's so many other questions that I feel like I want to ask. It's like, it's a fun topic, but it's also like, it's ironically, it's like outsized in how fun it is to talk about, but it's also like very under discussed.
Yeah. Isn't that odd? Well, I mean, I think that once you get talking about it, people really lean in. It's just that I think there's a lot of misinformation and not enough people doing it. But once you start, people don't shut up about their poop. People actually love to talk about it.
They do. What about, I saw something go trending on, it was on Instagram where it was a couple in an Airbnb, and the girl made the guy go outside, for a nondescript reason so that she could finally have a moment to poo.
Classic. I find this so often with my girlfriends who have just started dating someone new, and when in their relationship, is it date 1? Is it the first time you go to their place? Do you have to wait until date 10? When do you poop in front of each other? And I'm not even talking about you should all I'm all in favor of shutting the door. I think you need to feel safe. But when do you let the other party know that you too have a human body and you too respond to those calls? I don't know. I've had people who have been they'll wake up early if they spent the night, and they'll go to the condo lobby to poop, and then they'll just hurry back up. And it's do you think he or she doesn't know where you were and why you did? Is it not a little weirder that you did what you did?
I think it's a good. I think it's good to talk about, even in a humorous kind of way, to talk about pooping, just to normalize the discussion.
Yeah.
When you maybe even as a first date fodder, just to talk about.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't think it would
that
be
weird?
weird. No.
No?
I mean, not if you're a gastroenterologist. I think you like my husband still married me, but there's like multiple kinds of people at a dinner party, but some really lean in when you start talking about poop.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so tell us about the book. You've been pooping all wrong. How to make your bowel movements a joy. Again, amazing title.
Thank
A+
you.
on the title.
Yeah, the book really came about because, so I'm the daughter of a gastroenterologist. So I grew up talking a lot about poop. Like we did have the potty training conversation, I suppose. I don't remember that. But I do remember my high school years, middle school years, we were talking a ton about poop all the time. And then when I became a gastroenterologist, because obviously this was my favorite subject in the world, I noticed that a lot of adults like didn't know a lot of these basics. Like they would be like, how many bowel movements per day is normal? Is this color normal? And these were such mind-blowing questions to me because there was no question in my mind what was normal. I looked every day, obviously. And there were some people I'd be like, well, you know, they'd come in and they'd be like, I've been having diarrhea or I feel a little bit of stomach pain. And I'd be like, well, what did your poop look like? And they'd get so uncomfortable that I asked, and they'd be like, well, I don't look, you know, and like, how can you not look? I didn't understand. And then eventually, of course, I realized like a lot of people didn't grow up the way I did. And so this book is trying to address all of those gaps in our knowledge that we just don't get elsewhere. Like the dentists, for example, they do such a good job at teaching us and reinforcing how we should brush our teeth from like the day we're born. Like I put my 2-year-old as a dentist, and every 6 months we check in and they remind us how we're doing it and they tell us we're doing it all wrong and like, you know, whatever, but they check in every 6 months the rest of our lives. Who is doing that for you, for me, for pooping? No one. But that's like an equally important habit that we do, hopefully often. Maybe it's once a day, maybe it's not, but nobody's giving us those basics.
It's so true. So you've written this owner's manual for the, for that habit, which is so crucially important. One thing I did want to ask you actually, is there a medical justification for having a bidet in the house? I spent the majority of my life without a bidet until a couple of years ago. I got like a really cheap one on Amazon to just like connect to my toilet.
Yeah.
And it was life changing.
Yes.
And then I moved into a new house, and the toilets that came with the new house, it was a rental, so I couldn't change the toilets, but the toilets wouldn't allow the inexpensive, you know, bidet attachment. So I had to go all out, and now I have a bidet that costs more than a place I used to rent in Los Angeles.
Oh my God, but is it the best though with like
It
heated
is the best.
seats?
Heated seat,
The
toilet
best.
seat that automatically goes up and down. It's like the water is warm. Actually, I had to suffer through. I mean, it was still great, but the cold water, like straight from the tap, now it's warm.
Oh yeah.
And so, just utterly life-changing.
I think thank you for saying that, because I think that's the reaction when you try a bidet. And I think everybody who hasn't tried a bidet is like, oh, that's not for me. That's too weird. That's really weird. Because a lot of people are not used to trying new things back there. But once you try it, it's not just like, oh yeah, this was like a B+ experience. Have you ever heard anyone who got a bidet and was like, it was fine. It was okay.
No.
Everyone reacts like you.
Yeah. Life-changing, always.
Yeah.
So is it just a comfort thing, or is there like a medical, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, can you write it off as like a medical health purchase?
So, you know, I think I think they're more hygienic. And that's more than just me thinking that. There was a small study from Japan, the people who really understand how to use bidets, but they basically looked at the hands. So they had their participants put gloves on their hands, and they looked at the hands of people who wiped after they pooped or who used a bidet after they pooped. The people who wiped, those gloves had significantly more bacteria than the people who used the bidet. Maybe not so surprising, but I mean, and I haven't linked that like any disease states are linked to the bidet use or non-bidet use, but it is cleaner. But I actually do recommend bidets to so many of my patients. Like, for example, I see a lot of patients with Parkinson's disease. So older people with Parkinson's disease and other diseases often struggle. We don't talk about this, but they struggle to reach back there and stay balanced and wipe. You don't have to worry about that when you have a bidet. Women who are pregnant and when you're postpartum, everything's very tender. Having a bidet is lovely. People who have hemorrhoids, people who have anal fissures, people with IBD, people who have small tears back there, a bidet. Even people who just have slightly hairier posteriors benefit from a bidet. They don't feel like wiping often is enough. Bidets are great. All women on their periods, there's a lot going on. It's not pretty. bidets make you feel so clean. So I love bidets for everybody. I think that they are cost effective over the long term. Like people who are, sometimes a counter argument I hear is like, well, you use so much water. And it's like, okay, but how many trees are you wasting when you're using toilet paper? Like over time, the bidets make more sense.
Absolutely. It just feels so nice to have like a truly clean butthole.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
over the course of the day, you know?
You can't.
Compared to like the majority of my life when I just only use toilet paper, it's like in retrospect, like,
what were you thinking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems so barbaric.
Well, and maybe this is too much information, but let's do it. You know, like when I change my kid's diaper, every now and then something gets on me. Do I just like wipe it off with paper towel and then go about and cook them breakfast and go about the rest of my day? Like, absolutely not. You go and you wash it at least with water, hopefully with something else. But why do we do that for the most delicate? And that part of the body is more delicate than we think. We think because we're pooping, poop is yucky, that area must be so sturdy and so thick. And actually, that area is really, really delicate. It tears easily. The skin is soft. You want to treat it like the delicate work of art that it is. That's what the bidet does.
Amen. And you can find one super cheap, like on Amazon, like if your toilet will allow it. Very inexpensive
Totally.
attachment.
And you can attach it yourself, right? Like you don't, like I actually love the whole, like you take the whole seat out, you put in a heated seat. That's like the extreme end of it. But really all a bidet is a nozzle attachment that goes to your clean water supply. Anyone could install this at home.
Yeah. Don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. Get
Totally.
the inexpensive one and you can do it yourself. I've installed it myself. Are there any cultures that you think are doing this, you know, better than others? I mean, I know you mentioned Japan.
They've really got it sorted out.
They seem to. And then there are other parts of the world, right? Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but like in the Netherlands where they have like these poop shelves in their toilets.
Yeah, I think a lot of cultures like don't. I mean, I think we have this, like sometimes we still hold on to this like Victorian sense of propriety in America when it comes to our bowel habits, that other people are just willing to say, how can we innovate to make this more comfortable because we're all doing it all the time. And so I do think some other cultures have it correct. Now, like in India, for example, I think actually they've taken a little bit of a step backwards in some ways. They used to have a lot more of like a squatting like toilet, even just like the way that things were designed. They've all moved towards the like 90-degree angle. So I think we really influenced some countries in how we should be pooping in a way that is like not actually physiologically correct.
Amen. Well, thank you so much for writing this book. Thank you for coming out. This was so fun. I feel like we could go on for hours and hours and hours, but I want people to pick up your book. You've been pooping all wrong. Where can people support? Where can they pick up the book, and how can they connect with you on social media? And then I've got one last question for you.
Well, they can get it anywhere that books are sold. They can follow me on Instagram, Trisha Pasricha MD, or they can read my column in the Washington Post.
Love it. What does living a genius life mean to you?
You know, one thing I study is the enteric nervous system. The enteric nervous system is the brain of your gut. And for me, living a genius life is treating your gut like the brain that it is. And that means treating it with a lot more respect and care, the way we would treat the brain in our head.
Well said. Amen. Beautifully. And I agree. Thanks again for your
Thank
time.
you.
Thanks for coming out, your wisdom, your expertise, and the laughs. And thank you guys for listening. Share this episode with people in your life that may benefit from it. Might be awkward, but you'll have a few laughs and you'll be paying it forward. And I will catch you all on the next episode. Peace. Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.